everybody. My name is Denis Pastory. I'm a PhD student at Tokyo University of Agriculture. And today I'm going to give you a talk on emerging technological transfer to tackle invasive pest challenges in Sub-Sahara Africa. And my area of research is technically agriculture informatics, computer vision, applied data science in agriculture, GIS and remote sensing. So this research is it's in Sub-Sahara, and technically it's in Tanzania, and this is where Tanzania is, and the research we set up is around in an arid land that is around Arusha. And so the global vegetable seems to be really demanding in order to meet some of the demand of food, and vegetable really can contribute to this. And if you look at this chart here, tomato really contributes, is the leading contributor of vegetables, but they could be, and there are some challenges. And the motivation for this is that the tomato is actually considered as a really high value crop and income resource for poor growers. But recently there is a invasive tomato leaf miner that is Tuta absoluta. That's a major threat to tomato production. And for the case of Tanzania or Sub-Sahara, it causes loss of even up to 100%. So there is an urgent early pest detection quantification for effective management option at early stages for crop production to avoid economic loss. If you look at this map here, Tuta absoluta got into Tanzania in 2010 around the north, and look, by 2017 it had already spread around in almost 80% of African countries. Let me show you one of the real situation of the fields and where tomato is grown. This is one of the areas where tomato is grown a lot, and it's where they first discovered Tuta absoluta, which I'll show you the real Tuta absoluta. What you see here is these are kind of the fields that really are like 80% destroyed by Tuta absoluta. And as you can see, it's this like 1 acre of land. And this is in really arid land, as you can see the vegetation itself, which is dry. And people are really struggling with application of pesticides and to really see that they struggle with Tuta. I'm gonna move the slides a little bit ahead. You can see the real situation. Almost 80% of the crops are damaged, and here some of other, they also involved in some other production like onions, and this is maize or corn. So this is kind of the real situation of the types of typical fields where tomato is grown. So Tuta itself, this is a kind of a moth, and going through all the stages, with the most destructive stage, which is the larva, which technically affects the leaves, and it goes and it creates a mine, as you can see here. And to make matters worse, it's even now affects the leaves. I mean the leaves and the flowers. And these are some of show you some of the damages that it causes. I already told you about the leaves. It causes really damage to the leaves, and now it affects the flowers and even some unripe fruits and the fruits. So by the time the fruit gets to this age, it's already kind of damaged. These are some of the photos we took when we are getting the data from the in-house experiments that we set up, which I'll show you in the field. So in the market, actually, the status of tomato, this is how it is, but well, it looks good, but this is not the real situation of what we expect the tomato is. This is a quite different one. The real situation, this is the real situation. The small scale farmers really depending on this tomato. And if you look at this, it really has a very great impact to them. But I'm going to show you this next slide. This is the effect, what you see here. The tomato harvested, by the time they get to the market, like such a case, and when you just cut into it, you can see that's really affected in such a case, there's a loss. So that is the kind of situation that the people are facing it. And some of the current strategies are like use of pesticide, and these are quite costly. And for the case of Tanzania's per se, the pests are, tuta, they have become so resistant that even farmers have to use 3 to 5 pesticides to control them, which is really getting worse. The development of resistant tomato varieties is still practically not available for the case of Tanzania. And when it comes to the biological control, this is really a hard case. So for the new like IPMs that can get into like the use of pheromone traps to try to monitor, and this is just to monitor and determine the detection of the tuta. So when you look at this in terms of the economic case, the most farmers actually are now switching to low income generating crops due to massive losses. And this is one of the photo. You can see the ones demarcated with yellow cabbage, and the ones demarcated with red, it's a tomato field. And in real sense, this is supposed to be a tomato field, but people are now shifting to cabbage. We don't say cabbage, but the thing is, when it comes to the small farmers who are struggling to get income, this is a low paying, it's comparably to the tomato case. And this is what happens. It's really rapid for some of you who've come across this website, more especially in the southern South America, where tuta actually originated. When tuta affects the leaves on the second day and really expands, it's like a 4th day and the 5th day. And to make matters worse, if you look at a field, you can see really very significant when, for example, a case between 9 days at this stage and this stage when it's almost done, completely done. So the main goal of this work is to come up with tomato paste early detection and quantification tool that will help in strengthening phytosanitary capacity and systems for effective management option of tuta absoluta. And the methodology here, this is a computer-based methodology, and the approach for this is using, we've taken 2 approaches with the data which we started using. That's using the normal RGB, as stated here, and the other case is using the multispectral image. And what's the essence of this? To capture these imagery and get into the using CNN modules, which I'll explain later. And through the CNN module, and the tasks here is actually to have a classification and hence segmentation tasks using the CNN modules. And why do we have this? The end, we should be able to quantify, which I'll explain again later, of how we can quantify the damage status in, for example, in low, in medium, or in severe cases. And by quantification, we can determine the real-time status of the damage, that's if in the fields. And this is now used by the extension officers. The extension officers, maybe to mention about it, it's really limited when you talk about the case of like Sub-Sahara, where one extension officer has to cover a very big coverage, and the technical advice, which is really practical, very important when it comes to what kind of agriculture practices they have to do, how to use the pesticides in order to control not only tuta but even other pesticides, other pests. But again, also we have this research which is really important in the sense that they coming up with developing up diverse good methods which can hence be transferred to the extension, and the extension later have to deliver this information to the farmers. But again, sometimes it's the other way around, that the research have to deliver the message straight to all the approaches to the farmer. So this is the approach that we believe is really important, and by using the mass spectrum and RGB and the use of CNN here. The use of CNN here is we know how the latest emerging technologies like the artificial intelligence or the machine learning cases. So I'll give more discussions here and how we've managed to get to tackle this scenario. So I would like us to take it's been a brief, very fast introduction here, but maybe we'll take a small break as I get into the more details and maybe probably stop somewhere if need be. So, but before we get to that, let me get you the data collection case. So getting the data as tutor, as you've seen, it's really devastating. The crops, it's really not very hard. It's hard. So which case do we have to get the data? So the approach here was to get the data for the first 2 weeks of the tomato, which we set up in an in-house experiment. It's taken like 80% the environment because we really use the net house, which we can say the environment or the micro environment here will tend to depict the outside real situation. That's what we try to do. And maybe why didn't we do it outside? Because when you do it outside, definitely you'll spread it in other fields which probably are not affected by tutor. So we set up this kind of experiments. We already had two. That was last year and the start of this year. And towards September, we're gonna have some other experiment. What you see here, this is the in field, how the inside fields. And the inside, you can see how the plots. And here, what we did, we tried to use the real consider agronomic factors of the real fields. Like as you can see here, these are bands and we have drip. This was for the first experiment, the in-house experiment that we did. For the second one, this case, as you can see, it's almost drip irrigation. And this case, we just try to consider in other factors like how the stress can affect the tutor case. So, and for that case, when we had to plan this case, and so we had to inoculate the tutor itself. As you can see, the practice here, one of the researcher trying to inoculate the tutor, we used the larva, as this larva is what we introduced on the leaves of the tutor. That was between 2 larvae to 8 larvae, and that was between the 2nd and 4th instar of the tutor. So we had to introduce it ourselves at different levels, as I explained before. So that was the case. And how we got the data is for the mass spectral, we deployed the Parrot Sequoia, of which we installed in the in-house experiment. We customized the platform for the Sequoia to see that we get the mass spectral, which was about 2 meters. That was really pretty close, and with high resolution Parrot Sequoia, some who have used it, that was pretty close. So we set it like this, and as you can see, the red arrows, dotted arrows show the path of how we're taking the data for the mass spectral. And as I said, mentioned before, we use the RGB camera, which was taken at the canopy. We're considering taking the canopy of all the plants that we planted here. That was between 1 to 2 days interval for the first 2 weeks. And for each experiment, we had like 280 plus image that we had to take daily. The camera was about between 40 to 50 centimeters just above the plant itself. And yeah, we also took some other data, like this installed hopper, which takes the illumination and temperature. We took even the soils because we're monitoring the soil moistures to see that we consider those the agronomic factors. So with this, we'll take a small break, and if there is any question, I'll be ready to answer them. Yep. Okay, I got it. Can those channels reveal early stage evidence of disease presence? Well, this is what I'll talk about shortly in the classification and identification, which we tried, and they showed some promising results, which I'll show you just in the next coming slides. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then the last question that I can see is, was it necessary to align the different images of the multispectral camera?
Yeah, it was very necessary. The good thing with the Sequoia parrot, when you take the photos, we use the Pixel 30, which will align this imagery. So it was really necessary for the multispectral imagery.
Okay. And then there's one more, and then we'll move on to the next half
Sure.
from Garrett. Is there a specific reason to choose the parrot sequoia?
Well, no specific reason. This is from my past experience. I've been using Sequoia, so it was much easy to use the parrot Sequoia. And the good thing, it's maybe it's quite portable. It gives flexibility, taking like the time lapse, and image can really get it and put into the install get into like Pixel 40, which I've been. So no specific reasons, and I've not tried any other multispectral camera. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so we'll move on to the second half. I'll mute myself now, and then we'll have more questions at the end of the presentation. Okay, thank you.
Sure. Hello. So we move on to the next part, and from the as I mentioned, many questions are coming, but when some of the evaluations that we already did, and of course we could expect, it's kind of obvious that, but we have to show it really, and you can see the damage that tutor itself affects. It's really terrible within a very short time. And since some of the results that we showed, we can see with such these are like in the 3 blocks which were within the experiment. We had, like, you see, the slope of 2.7, and yeah, that was really terrible. So one asked the question where it was necessarily to align. Yeah, the alignment, the good thing with Parrot Sequoia, it allows this when you use it, and you can, when you get this image into the Pixel 40, you can easily align them. But we took the imagery. This is the alignment in this sequencing within the greenhouse, because it has, we consider, like 70% overlap. And this is kind of the mosaic image for different dates. And of course, it's quite tricky, because, you know, for example, previous experiments that I've done, we use with the Parrot Sequoia, been taken like maybe about 30, but this time it's 2 meters just close. So it's really pretty tricky. So you have to go into and, you know, pick maybe some good photos. I mean, try to meet the 70 overlap. So you have to be kind of, for whoever tries it, maybe in a very close, like above the height above the object that you're taking. It's quite close because of that case. So considering taking at least to get to 70% overlap. So we, when it comes to for the RGB, we had over 4,000 plus labeled images, and the essence of this was to, as I mentioned earlier, to get into CNN module and get to the low, to quantify it, and to low, medium, severe, and hence use it for the use at the end. At least the farmers should be able to use as early control measures. So let me show you some of the photos that we took and the real tasks that were ahead of us. We have this identification where you have to identify these from the RGB. I'm talking about the RGB, whether they're healthy and the ones which are affected with tutor. And then we have this classification where if it's healthy, then how damaged is it, for example, low damage and high tutor damage. And this is depicted in the essence, like, you know, the number of leaves and maybe the number of tutor. So it's quite tricky when you just identify in this case. And the other thing is you have now to quantify it into several, how severe is it? 1%, 20%, and 50%. at least we've been able to go up to the classification case. We'll show you, and there lies a task ahead where we have to really quantify these cases. If you look at these photos, somebody asked about why take in-house, and I mentioned it was really more to depict the real field. And if you can see these photos there, the background itself, it's like more that's in the field, and that's the hard task that we had. You can see all these photos here, they've got different background. But again, the other thing is which photo are you going to consider? But of course, somebody will get it right. We took for the first 2 weeks, so we don't expect these images, but we expect to use these images which you took for the first 2 to 3 weeks. That was between interval 1 to 3 days, which we use into our model. And shortly, a typical machine learning pipeline would consider getting the image and then doing some pre-processing, the segmentation, then extracting features, and then classifying it. And for example, I've taken this photo. If you consider, for example, such a leaf where you have to do all this pre-processing, segmentation, and at least the end you should be able to identify like herbicide. And but there's the other thing that such a case, for example, we tried it, for example, if you consider such a case just like a leaf, but our image is just a whole plant. We don't want to deal with leaves. And with previous works, maybe I've read about them, where like the plant village and some others where they take considered like leaves taken in the lab. So this is a whole leaf, which is the whole plant canopy, which is put into consideration. Now, if you do like trying to this stage of segmentation, as you saw by the corresponding pictures below the leaf here, it looks pretty good where you want to segment it and only remain with the leaf that you can to your modules. And well, if you get to this, it's quite tricky. You have this leaf which is got the mine here, but when you do like the watershed, this is what you expect. And for example, if you look at this point here and this point, it's really different. It's now got out the target object which you're looking for. And so if you put in a module, probably this will get you that this is an autoturn. Definitely the modules that we tried were not really effective. This is another scenario. The background itself, if you take now the whole photo, by the previous one, that was just lit. But now if you take the whole photo here, I mean, the canopy, it's now a different thing. You know, they have this background, which you're trying at least to get out, to segment and only remain with the plant probe, which you can put into your module and be able to go on further classification. Then we have such a case that it's now really different. Maybe we can bear with this now. So the typical pipeline of a normal machine learning, when you follow that, doing the manual feature extraction and all this, quite tiresome. That's why for this case, we had to get into adopting the convolution neural network. And for this task, which I'm explaining here, the main two tasks were the one which is the classification, that's the healthy and the infested one. Then the other one was identification. We had to identify the healthy tomato, the low infested tuta tomato, and the really high infested raw tomato by using the modules here. And with a simple, I'm just giving one where one of the results when we use like a VGG16 and a ResNet 50. And with a small data set, it was pretty promising where you could, in spite of all the background and stuff, but VGG could get at least 89 with the accuracy, and ResNet was pretty, lower than the GG, which is 83. That was for classification where you had to identify the healthy and the infested one. That's the main basic task, which probably could be done. But when it comes to the identification, it's really tricky because, as I mentioned earlier, we have this quantification case, but can we just quantify it in terms of the low, high? We considered only two cases, the healthy, low, and high. Still, it's promising. We have 85 and 81. in terms of the considering this kind of performance, just the accuracy and the validation, and considering very small image number, of course, with a lot of augmentation, which we did here, which is again very tricky because we couldn't just adopt a simple augmentation, because the thing is, within the image here we have tutor, which is here, but imagine zooming in maybe to 0.5 and probably it's gonna cut out, and you won't be able to see the image which has tutor won't be able to be included. The ones which is health is maybe pretty okay. So these are some of the considerations which we had to put in when we are trying to develop this kind of approach. And so the ongoing work is I've showed you the previous one because I never wanted to go into too much into the detail, but how we tackle this. And this was basically the infested and the healthy, and the other identification, which was into the healthy, the low imagery tutor, and the low and the high imagery tutor. And so the task is, we've seen how, but we still have to get the background, which is really pretty okay, and such that we can, the phenomenon that reducing the background will definitely help in the identification and doing the quantification. So apparently, as we mentioned, tutor itself, it really grows very fast. If you see here, it's the second day, and this is the third day and the fourth day of, this is just when you zoom in onto one leaf. And we have many of them, as I've tried to show this masked out image here, where, for example, you have this red, which shows the tutor, the green is the plant, and the black one is the background. So this such a scenario, and the quantification which I'm trying to say is that within this photo here, which has got tutor, we have to tell now, with this plant which is affected by tutor, is it 10% severe? Is it 30% severe? This is on the normal base of a plant. And in a field, of course, you may have thousands and maybe hundreds of plants. Now, quantifying that into, this is a case, but we have to get that into a single plant, and then scale it up to the whole field, which can now give us the real essence. And for this case, which I've quantified for the first 2 weeks, we still insist for the first 2 to 3 weeks, because of this first spread of the tutor itself. If you go maybe to the 4th week without, you may apply the chemicals, maybe you're gonna get already damaged. So the initial, it's really important to control it in the first case. At least we have to know at what severity it is, and such that we can be able to tackle the case. So the expectations are using this computer vision approach, and with the mass spectral, maybe I didn't mention this before, at least it has the feature, it has the because of the different bands that we used, like the Sequoia, which has a near infrared, red edge, red and green, and more especially the red edge, where the spectral characteristics can be determined, and in a time series of taking the photos here, the spatial temporal quantification can be determined, and for this case, to be able to know the population dynamics there, which is really very critical, because the plant specialists, as I may state it that way, would like even to know how is it spreading in that case. So embedding all this is really the case of this case. And so expectations is talking about the quantification. Now, if you scale it up into fields, bigger fields, I showed you before, a case like 1% severity and 40% or 90%, which is almost done. But what's the case when it's in the whole field or in an area, we expect it to see this kind of a damage status. And so this real-time damage status map is what has to be used by the extension officers. And what do I mean? They have now to target these more specific, the critical areas, and by targeting more critical areas, that means more strict for example, quarantines or more strict approaches will be taken to control it. It's not very easy like to eradicate it, but the point is to get it to control it. But looking at this case, but look, when this information is got from them is the case. That's why the target is like the law, the damage status, and for their use. Yeah, this work to conclude is it's a team of collaboration between Turkey University of Agriculture, Nelson Mandela African Institute of Science and Technology, and Sokoine University. And we have Lillian here, is expert in information, is part of the team. And we have Dr. Zekaya, who is specifically the entomologist who knows all about the tutor and the case. And when it comes to the agronomy and stuff we have, so this is how we formed this team to see how we can tackle it. And maybe for further questions and maybe after this webinar, I've included my contacts here where we can keep in touch and more see how we can get to it. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so we have about 10 minutes to take some more questions. Yeah, this is really great work, and these types of issues of invasive insects are happening all over the world. I know that we are also facing some very similar types of problems and also taking similar approaches. So it's very familiar, but it's a different pest. So, so a question I had for you is in terms of creating a PhD project so that you can finish. Obviously, the work is very important in terms of agriculture, but you're in Japan. The field site is in Tanzania, right? And what's the season like? Like, is there a season for these insects, or are they continually reproducing, or do they have like 2 life cycles a year, or what's that like? How do you get it done?
Okay. Yeah, thank you. For the last 2 experiments that we carried out, we consider 2 main seasons. That's from August, that's considering the Arusha area, and that's from August.
Okay.
And then we had another experiment which is from January. So I definitely have to be there. So you have to keep shunting to go and stay there at least for more than one month and so.
Month.
Yeah. So for the 2 experiments, this has led me to go there like 4 times. That's more than maybe 6 months, and because this is a more real field case. So that's in Arusha, but the thing is, tomato is grown like in Morogoro, those basic regions of Tanzania, Iringa. That's the biggest area. So with the start with Arusha, we hope to expand this and get to the real expand and get maybe more data and understand the real scenario of this whole country, and hence maybe spread it to the other Sub-Sahara case Africa, as they tend to have the same climatic conditions. Yeah, thank you, Annie.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So, all right. And so there's another question. All right. So there's some questions about the annotation, and specifically about how you're doing it in the multispectral images. So are you painting? Are you annotating each band, or are you doing it in a pixel-wise fashion? Are you doing bounding boxes? How are you doing that exactly?
Oh, well, as you see in this presentation, I didn't mention much about the mouse spectra because I just completed the data. So no much work has been done about it, but maybe to look at what has been done for the mouse spectra is because the image, as you see, the potato, the tomato is kind of separate, so we have to crop out the potato. Why am I saying potato? We have to crop out the tomato, which will, because we want to use the same model which is for the RGB, and because the mouse spectra has some other layers which we have to use because it will help us, at least in the module which you have, people have to understand the features. So that's one case. So when we do that, maybe if anyone is interested and keeps following, I'll be maybe updating. But the other thing, the annotation, I didn't mention something about annotation. We are trying much as possible not to get into annotation for the first case. We want to develop the module first. If we can, then we can get to the annotation. And the case of the annotation, we intend to, is what I'm working on actually, to not just to have an unsupervised classification. That's what we're trying to avoid, not the supervised where we have to annotate that. Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
Yep.
And then I have one more question. Oh, so good. So there's, all right, so I have three more questions currently that I can see. So there's another question about Pix4D. How many images do you have to take to generate the mosaic? Because if you are getting pictures from 2 meters above, maybe you need more than 70% coverage. And is your mosaic kind of blurry or not? And what is the purpose of generating the mosaic?
The mosaic for the Pix4D, for such a small area, the in-house experiment, which is like 12 meters, we only need at least 10 images for one line. And so that's it. That's the other hard thing of it, where we have to pick out some. That's for the in-house. But for the outside field, I didn't show here, but we also took the real fields in the outside, and depending on this area of the area, we don't have to pick out some photos. It's just get out maybe the first few image and the last one, which are not needed probably because this has to be put. The sequoia was put on a parrot sequoia parrot a drone, which took the photos. So the photos which are taken, we just input into the Pix4D, and it will definitely the mosaic and give you the different mosaic layers of the 4 bands which are considered in this case. And Pix4D also gives you the advantage that you can get you even the like NDVI if you have to use it. Yeah, thank you.
Okay. And another question is the damage in the images looks very severe. So, and also when the spots are small, did you try, for instance, to segment based on NDVI at pixel level?
Oh, yes. I mentioned that before. We haven't done for the melt spectra, so I'm going to limit this talk on not to mention about the melt spectra. I can't mention exactly how extent, because it's just it's for the melt spectra, it's work on progress. So I may not have the right answer now. Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
And then the last question that I currently see, so if people do have questions, go ahead and type them in. Are these data open access or free to share?
Well, when for the first 2 experiments, we have to make them open access, and even the other experiments, we have to make it open access. So at the end, we definitely have to make them open access, because when it comes to like the tomato case, if you look at the biggest database, maybe the Plant Village, when you talk about the tutor miner, for the first 2 weeks, I think probably there's no kind of this data. So we'll definitely have to make them available. So, but if you need them, you can maybe contact me and I can share with you with my contact, which is down there. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And then another follow-up, do you have a plan to publish this work?
Yes, hopefully at the end of this year. Yeah, because we are writing already the paper, so probably go through. We'll have the publications in the nearby future.
Okay, yeah, so anyone who's on the call, if you're interested in getting updates, I think the best thing to do would be to write Denis, and then he can send you the link when it's available.
Yeah, maybe Twitter.
If you wanna.
Probably I'll have to, maybe if people are using Twitter, I'll have to include the Twitter, maybe, yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's there's another question.
Okay.
If you want to use unsupervised classification and are not annotating, how can you use CNNs?
That's a good question. That's of recent, the work which is going on. Try not to use the supervised, like the annotation. And let me give you just a case like tutor, when you can see the mind, for example, case of salience maps, where we can see the future. By the future, I mean, when the salience map, or basically like a heat map of, for example, a plant, and you can see the heat map of the plant or the leaf with tutamine. So this is a case where we're trying to do. So the only thing is to be able to quantify that salience, like marble, the heat map of that tutor, which is on the leaf. So that's the approach we're heading to. So the annotation, we're trying to skip it away. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, very good. All right, everyone. So thank you very much for the webinar, Denis, and thank you everyone on the call for being very gracious about the technical difficulties of today. And